everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm reviewing the new cheek palette from Nars. This is called the Overlust palette. This just launched on the Sephora website. It sold out pretty quickly on the Sephora website. It just arrived today, and as you guys know, I recently uploaded my review of the Afterglow palette from Nars. This is their newest one. In that video, many of you guys asked me, hey, are you going to be doing the new blush palette? And so I was like, yes, I will definitely grab it for you guys and, you know, play around with it. I am wearing it as blush and eyeshadow today. Just because sometimes when you put it on as eyeshadow, you can really get to know the textures a little bit more than you can just by applying it on the face. So on the top row, you have the highlight, like illuminating type of creamy type of formula. Then here on the bottom, you have the blushes. Now the blushes are still very creamy. They're a creamy matte formula, but they're exceptionally creamy. Like when you put your finger in them, they're not super powdery. They do have a creamy texture to them, but they're not like a full cream. So they're still powdery. These are definitely more of the cream formula. And this palette is made in Italy. So you get 0.9 ounces worth of product, which is 27 grams. You get quite a bit of product in this little palette, which is nice, especially when you're using, you know, for like a blush and a highlighter. So in this video, I am going to be applying it on the skin, showing you guys how all of the shades look. And then we're gonna get into the swatches, and then I will get into my full final thoughts at the end of the video. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the application portion of the video, and I will see you guys in my final thoughts. Okay, so let's dive into this palette. So it came in this packaging right here. It has like the shades here on the back, all the information. And then this is the front of the packaging, you know, typical Nars, very beautiful. And if you open it up, this is what the actual palette looks like. So in the camera, it's coming across a little bit more like muted. In real life, it's definitely a little bit more vibrant. I don't really think that any of these are really gonna work for a bronzer. This one might, but it's more of a, that's what that one looks like. Maybe that might work for a bronzer, but it might look more like a blush. I don't know. Let's see what it's gonna look like. I'm just gonna grab my bronzer brush. This is the Refer bronzer brush. I'm gonna grab this shade right here. Yeah, it's definitely more of a blush. It's not really a bronzer. Yeah, I need a bronzer. I'm just gonna grab my Hourglass. This is the Ambient Bronze Light. Kind of bronze up the cheeks a little bit. All right, so now I'm a little bit more bronzed. I'm gonna grab this shade right here. This is the Inushish, I guess, Pro Brush from Sonia G. I'm gonna go into the middle shade right here. It goes on like a typical Nars blush. Now I will tone everything down with some powder. I have not powdered yet. Normally I do that in the last step. I'm gonna wipe the brush off, and let's go into this shade right here, which is more of like a pinky mauve shade. I always love Nars blush. They're very, very soft on the skin. And, you know, normally I never get any like streaking or patchiness or anything like that. Now, if I look straight ahead on this side, this definitely looks a little bit more like pinky mauve. This one is a little bit more peachy, just so you guys can see the difference. On this side, I'm gonna grab the middle shade right above that peachy tone and put that right over top. Is this like a wet? Oh, it's a wet formula. I couldn't get it to pick up on the brush. I was like, wait, it's not picking up on this brush. So it does not pick up on this brush. So let me grab this little fan brush and see if I can get a little bit to pick up on here. Oh yeah, that's super pretty. So I'm gonna grab this shade right here. And my brush is black, so I can see if I've picked it up. This is the tapered highlighter brush, the F35 from Sigma. So that's a very, very soft way to apply this product. You're not gonna get a lot of impact when applying this with a brush. A brush just doesn't pick it up because it is such a creamy formula. It picks it up a little bit, but not enough to give you like a, you know, a strong highlight. So for those of you out there that don't like a strong highlight, you know, that's something to keep in mind. If you want your highlighter to just kind of shine up the skin a little bit, then I would recommend using a brush. Let's go in with the finger. So I'm gonna grab this shade right here. I've got some here on the finger. And I'm just gonna go right over top of my cheekbone with that shade. Oh yeah, the finger just applies this so beautifully. I'm just kind of doing those like circular motions up here on my forehead. So I'm gonna take my finger and go into this first shade right here. Let's put this on this side. Oh yeah, see how the difference is from a brush to a finger? Like you could even do a sponge with this, but it's pretty. It's not overly creamy though. So that's the other point that I want to make. It's not like when you dip your finger in there, it feels creamy. It's kind of a mixture between a creamy and a solid. So it's not like a full creamy formula. Let's go into this shade right here and let's put it right here. So the thing that I like about this so far is that like these two shades would go pretty together. Like they've done kind of the work for you. So if you're going to use like a peach blush, like this golden tone above it would be perfect to match with it. And then if you're going to use like this really pretty like dusty mauve type of shade, then you've got this really pretty pinky dusty shade to use as a highlighter. And then over here, you have more of like a pop of a pink, like a light baby pink. And this shade right here is kind of like a light champagne gold, and that would pair well with that. So I do like how they're corresponding. When I first saw this palette, and even when I first dipped into it, I didn't really see the palette that way until I used it. Now that I've used it, now I see it like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Like this is a pair, this is a set, this is a set. So I like that. And you can also mix and match, but it's kind of done the work for you. So that's kind of cool. So that's it for the application portion of the video. I'm gonna go ahead and go off camera. I'm gonna powder, kind of soften all this up. The only thing I'm noticing is that you can see kind of like this dark shadow. That's something that I need to cover, you know, like I need to powder and kind of blend that dark shadow into my skin just so that it doesn't like stick out like that. But I'm going to go ahead and powder and kind of buff all this in, finish the rest of my makeup, and then I will be back. We will get into the swatches of the palette, and then I will get into my final thoughts. So I will see you guys then. Okay, so now that we got through the swatches, let me go ahead and get into my final thoughts. So I want to quickly mention that I did use this palette on my eyelids, and I felt like it would just be a little bit more of a way for me to get it to know the formula a little bit more, just so that when I, you know, came on and talked about it, I had a little bit more experience with it than just applying it on the face. And it actually turned out really pretty on the eyes. I used this shade kind of in the crease and then kind of mixed between these two shades, put it on the lid, and then I grabbed this shade and put it on the inner corner. Turned out really pretty. So this is a nice palette. I will say for me personally, I don't feel like this palette is like necessary. I think the only person that really needs this palette is if you're in the market for a new blush. Like, you know, if you're in the market and you really wanted to try a new blush, or, you know, I just don't, it's like with blush palettes, you really gotta need them to really get them. You know what I mean? Now don't get me wrong, I have a lot of blushes, and recently I have fallen madly in love with the Scott Barnes blush palette, and honestly you get way more for your money with the Scott Barnes palette. You know, you get 8 shades, plus these two are also creamy like the Nars palette is. So you get 8 shades for $58, where with the Nars palette you get 6 shades for $59. You know, the Nars palette is made in Italy, which is nice, but I like this palette, and I feel like this palette is for people who are in the market for like a really soft blush. Like the highlighters, just very soft and very muted. So I feel like this palette is not going to be for that person that likes that really popping highlighter or like really likes that really bright blush. This is just a very soft formula and very muted, which, you know, we all need the muted once in a while. So this is a nice palette. I think the thing that I like most about this palette is the texture of the actual blush shades. These are very creamy. Now, they're not actually creamy. They're not a creamy formula, but they apply very creamy on the skin, and they have this like creamy texture to them, which I really like. But do I feel like this palette is absolutely necessary? Not unless you're in the market for a new blush. Like, I just don't see the reason to pay $59 for a palette unless you're really in the mood to buy a blush palette. Like, you haven't bought one yet and you really like these shades, then, you know, go for it. But I don't feel like this is something that you really need to run out and rush out and grab. It just depends on what you actually need in your collection. But if you do need a new blush palette and this is something that you're interested in and you are looking for that more muted type of application, I think you'll really enjoy this. The shades are not all that unique. I think we have these shades in a lot of our other blush palettes. So I think we all have to keep that in mind. I would go through your blushes and see if you have these shades, because 9 times out of 10 you're probably going to. So I think you have to decide, do I actually really need that? Probably not. But if you want it, it's your money. You do whatever you want with it. Sometimes I just need that like little reminder to say, you don't really need that. Like, you've got all of those shades in other palettes. You don't need that. You know what I mean? So I'm just here to give you a little bit of a friendly reminder that you might not need this palette. The packaging on this, yes, is very fancy. And we are, you know, the consumer pays for the packaging. The brand just doesn't do that on its own, you know, for a treat for us. We pay for the packaging. There is quite a bit of product in this palette, which does make it nice. But I actually do really like the formula. I think the formula is very soft, and it's not muddy, and it's not chalky. That's the 2 things that I look for when I'm talking about a blush palette and I'm reviewing a blush palette. Number 1, I can't stand a chalky palette. Like, I can't stand a blush that's chalky, and I can't stand a blush that applies very muddy looking, and this doesn't. This is very soft on the skin. It applies really beautifully, and the other thing that's nice about it is it's very buildable. So, you know, these shades are so soft and so muted that it's extremely buildable on the skin. But again, it just depends on if you're in the, you know, if you're in the market for a new blush palette. If you're not in the market for the new blush palette, then I don't really feel like this is something that you need to rush out and grab. You know what I mean? As you guys know, I did review the Afterglow palette, and I'm still not having the best luck with this. I tried to use it the other day, and I just don't really like this palette. It's not my favorite, and I think it is still because there's just so many variations of textures in here that it's just kind of like a pass for me. There's not enough of the formula that I prefer from Nars to justify the price for this palette. Do you know what I'm saying? If that makes sense. Because like I said in my review, this formula over here is my absolute favorite formula. And there's not enough shades in this palette with that formula to make this palette worth the splurge. So those are my final thoughts on the new blush palette from Nars. Thank you guys so much for requesting for me to review that palette. You guys know that I love to hear your guys' feedback. Whatever you guys are interested in, you guys know I will love to grab it and give you guys the 411 on it. So if there's anything else that's popped out and you guys are interested in, definitely let me know. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you guys so much for the love that you show me in my channel. It means the absolute world to me. I hope you guys have a wonderful day filled with love and joy. I will see you guys in my next video, and I love you all so much. Bye.